Yesterday, a material was released on our channel that caused a fairly harsh reaction from a portion of the viewers. The main argument of the critics boiled down to one thing. Supposedly, it cannot be true that American military transport aircraft, including those used for the transfer of special forces and paratroopers, are landing on the territory of Turkmenistan. One of the main counter-arguments was also that Ashgabat has officially adhered to a policy of neutrality for many years. Therefore, further on, I will try to explain in simple language how this might actually look, and why neutral Ashgabat will be forced to provide a corridor for the Americans for a strike on Iran. I do not claim to be the ultimate truth. This is only my analysis, based on those reports that are currently coming from the region. Let us start with the most controversial point: American military transport aircraft in Turkmenistan. This is not my invention or a fantasy out of thin air. Such reports are indeed circulating through various sources, and what is important, many of them refer to data from the Flight Radar 24 service. Why is this interesting to anyone at all, and why do people look at it? Because Flight Radar collects real flight data that aircraft transmit over the air. Who is flying, where they are flying, at what altitude, and at what speed. Yes, the military can hide, turn off transponders, and fly without a civilian tag. But if a board lights up in such a service, it is no longer "someone said," but a trail that can be checked. That is precisely why such reports, if not proof, are definitely a reason to look closer, rather than brush them off. Now about the second reproach. Turkmenistan is neutral, so it cannot happen. Here it is important to understand one simple thing. Neutrality is not a spell or armor. It is a policy. And policy changes when a country becomes afraid or it becomes unprofitable. And one doesn't even need to go far. Look at the recent example of Finland, whose neutrality status held for many more times than Ashgabat's. For decades, the country was considered neutral, kept a balance, and did not irritate anyone. And then, bang, and Finland joins the North Atlantic Alliance. That is, in a short time, a neutral country turns into a participant of a large military bloc and automatically becomes a potential target for the Russian Federation. Not because it would be beautiful, but because the Finns suddenly decided their former neutrality no longer protects them. There is an even more vivid example: Belgium. It was neutral exactly until the moment the First World War came to it. Neutrality did not save it because no one was asking about it anymore. And Turkey is also a good example. It loves to show independence, knows how to sit on two chairs, bargain, and play its own game. But when the stakes are truly high, Turkey always does what is profitable for its survival and security, rather than what sounds beautiful in slogans and agreements. That is, the very thought that a neutral country cannot sharply change its behavior is, to put it mildly, a myth. It certainly can. The question is only, why and for what? And now we come to the main thing. Why American military planes are flying to Turkmenistan. And most importantly, why would Turkmenistan even make a sharp turn and meet the United States halfway? My answer is this: not out of love for Washington, and definitely not out of a desire to wage war with Iran, but because of the fear of getting such a problem at its borders that neutrality will not save it from it all. Now to the details. Let us start with geography. Here is the city of Mashhad, one of the ideological and economic centers of Iran, located less than 100 kilometers from the border with Turkmenistan. This is not somewhere far away in the Middle East. This is very close, almost right next to Ashgabat. Now let us imagine a hypothetical but logical picture. Serious turbulence is accumulating inside Iran. Under the pressure of sanctions, a constant external threat from the United States of America, and a general feeling that the country is being deliberately destabilized from the outside. In such an atmosphere, state institutions and religious structures begin to seek not only political, but also symbolic support. In this logic, the city of Mashhad becomes a natural center of attraction. It is one of the main religious cities of the country, a place of pilgrimage, possessing colossal ideological weight and its own economic base. Unlike Tehran, which in a crisis situation turns into a vulnerable target for pressure, protests, and possible strikes, Mashhad is perceived as a more protected and sacred assembly point. I will point out that Mashhad is located very close to Turkmenistan. If the tension inside Iran grows and the risk of destabilizing the capital increases, part of the religious leaders and radical groups may deliberately shift the center of activity exactly there. Not because Tehran is falling, but because in a crisis situation, power and ideology instinctively reach for a place where it is easier to mobilize supporters, appeal to faith, and build an alternative center of influence. In such an environment, harsh Shiite movements begin to take shape, a conditional Shiite analog of ISIS with its own core, ideology, and combat wing. They are fueled not only by the internal crisis, but also by the conviction that external pressure and a possible military threat make compromises impossible. It is precisely this combination, pressure from the outside, sacred geography, and fear for the country's future, that can push such forces toward concentration in Mashhad, rather than in the capital. The most disturbing scenario arises further. If such structures develop a contact or a coincidence of interests with the Sunni Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which already possesses great combat experience, established logistics, and people who have gone through real wars. Such an alliance, even if informal, turns into an extremely dangerous mix for the entire region. What does this result in for Central Asia? An explosive mixture. Shiite ideology plus Sunni combat experience, religious motivation plus regional ties, and all of this near borders that are difficult to control. Why is this most terrifying precisely for Turkmenistan and the same Uzbekistan? Because they have less insurance. Judge for yourselves. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are in the tight security zone of China. There is influence, coordination, and mechanisms that China knows how to turn on when necessary. Kazakhstan is in the joint focus of attention of China and the Russian Federation. Everyone has risks, but there is someone and something to suppress those risks with. But Turkmenistan is neutrality, isolation, a minimum of alliances. Uzbekistan is a cautious, independent policy without a tough umbrella. And it turns out that they have much fewer mechanisms for a joint response to Islamic fundamentalism. Therefore, they are more vulnerable. And here the logic appears, which many do not like, but it works. If Ashgabat does make a cautious tilt toward Turkey and the United States, it is not because it was broken or bought, but because it is afraid of getting a hotspot right next to it, which could spill across the border, destabilize the country, and destroy the very logic of neutrality. And if the leadership of Turkmenistan feels that such a risk is becoming real, it may go for things that yesterday seemed impossible. For example, quietly give the United States a corridor or a logistical opportunity for an unexpected attack by American forces on Iran. Not for beautiful politics, but because, as it will seem to them, there is already no other choice. And if it seems to the leadership of Turkmenistan that such a risk is becoming real, it may take steps that only yesterday seemed impossible. For example, to quietly provide the United States with a logistical corridor or limited opportunities for actions against Iran, not out of considerations of beautiful politics, but because, as it may seem to Ashgabat, there is simply no other way out. And here a significant coincidence arises, which is difficult to ignore. Just now, fresh information has appeared, based on satellite images. Iran is taking additional measures for masking and protecting the nuclear facility in Isfahan. According to these images, the entrances to the tunnels on the territory of the complex are completely covered with earth. The middle and southern entrances are no longer discernible from the air. A strange decision by Tehran, isn't it? Experts explicitly point out, such actions poorly protect the object from a powerful airstrike or the use of bunker-buster munitions. For them, the presence of open entrances is not critical at all. However, filling the tunnels looks like a completely logical measure precisely against ground or special operations, including attempts by enemy special forces or sabotage groups to infiltrate important facilities. And here, a parallel involuntarily suggests itself. Against the backdrop of reports that American military transport aircraft intended precisely for the transfer of special forces and paratroopers, such as the C-17 Globemaster, as well as the MC-130 Super Hercules, are arriving in Turkmenistan, Iran almost immediately begins to physically seal the entrances to its key nuclear facilities. Whether this is a coincidence or not, no one will say officially. But the logical chain looks indicative enough to ask the question, exactly what scenarios is Tehran trying to ensure itself against first and foremost? That is why I say, this whole story does not have to be 100% true right now, but it has an internal logic, and therefore, this version has every right to exist. Which means that in the confrontation between the United States and Iran, we may yet see unexpected surprises, as occurred, for example, in Venezuela.